Hello, I go by Tesla, Moira, and Orbs. I have a little over 300 hours on Moira, mostly in competitive. I peaked top 500 rating on 2 accounts this season 11, and I'm currently ranked number 2 and number 4 Moira on Overbuff. I cannot claim to be the best Moira, as that is not possible given the different playstyles. I have been wanting to make a guide for a while, but didn't have the commitment until I started to see more people asking for a more thorough Moira guide. I feel that I have a lot to share about how to succeed with Moira in the top 1%. I really enjoy Moira's playstyle and believe that she is viable in pretty much every situation. This guide covers strategy I use to succeed with Moira. It's my playstyle. Your playstyle might be different, and that's totally okay. Try to implement these tips into your gameplay and make sure you understand why you are doing a certain action. I am not going to get into the basic ability overview, as this guide is long enough and is more of an advanced guide anyway. People new to Overwatch might find some of the points a bit confusing. Without further ado, I'll start with a character overview. Moira is incredibly dynamic. You need to be able to balance her abilities in order to succeed. Moira enables very aggressive tank play as she can supply heals through a lot of damage. Her healing output can be insane if coordinated well. While it is generally frowned upon to overstep into the DPS Moira realm, there are times where it is viable to go off and secure a kill. Moira's abilities allow for a variety of playstyles. My playstyle tends to focus more on healing than damage, but who am I to say that is the only way to succeed? Next, I'll talk about Moira's role. Moira's main job is to provide a lot of healing during the beginning and middle of teamfights. Hopefully, toward the end of the teamfights, she can get Coalescence and secure the point. Her secondary role is to secure kills. That would otherwise be challenging for the DPS players to finish off. This means that while you are securing the kill, you still must recognize teammates around you that require healing, as healing is your primary goal. Do not tunnel vision the enemy. Probably the most important aspect of Moira's healing is that once you have applied healing from Biotic Grasp to an ally, they will be healed 50 HP over 3 seconds. When healing outside of teamfights, always use Healing Over Time or Healing Orb to save resources. During teamfights, hold down left click for teammates taking direct damage. Otherwise, use short bursts of healing and Healing Orb for less in-danger allies. When you use Biotic Grasp to heal allies, try and line up your heals. This saves your resource by 2 times or more, depending on how many allies you have lined up. Don't be afraid of holding down left click to heal up low HP tanks after teamfights. The ult charge you gain from them will most likely make up for the lost resource. Lining up tanks for healing is one of the fastest ways to charge your ult. If you are full on resource, I do what's called a heal flick. Position yourself close to your allies and tap heal while slow flicking the mouse about 180 degrees. If done so correctly, you will have applied a lingering healing effect to most of your allies. I do this even if no enemies are near, because there is no downside to keeping your teammates buffered up, and the resource used will have regenerated by the time your teammates have lost lingering healing. While not as important outside teamfights, make sure to do this before any enemy pushes. You never know when you're going to have to finish off an enemy, and it's helpful to know that you're still healing your team. There is a known bug, at least I think it's a bug, where Moira can rapidly tap right-click to gain resource faster. I have never found this extremely useful in my games, but each their own. Healing averages go up corresponding to rank. This means that it isn't exactly possible all the time to get the same healing averages in Plat than you would in Grandmaster. In Grandmaster, players group up more and are more coordinated. Of course you'll see higher averages. Just do the best that you can do. Is when you have 2 methods of healing applied to the same target. I'm going to start off with Healing Orb and Biotic Grasp. This is an incredibly useful tool for keeping teammates alive that are being hard focused. This does 155 healing per second. There are not many abilities that can outdamage this. In fact, this healing will significantly delay some DPS ultimates such as Dragon Blade or Visor. This combo is often sufficient to out-heal most Graviton Surges, unless there's a Bomb, Blade, or Dragons. Healing Orb and Coalescence. A better version of the last combo, this does 215 heals per second. Combined with Annonade, you have more healing than Transcendence with 322.5 heals per second. This means that your team can survive Graviton Dragon combo, which does a little over 300 DPS. Biotic Grasp plus any other healer. Honestly, any increase to Moira's already very high healing per second will seem very high. Coordinate with your other healers to heal up large tanks. Sensitive subject when it comes to the Overwatch community. There are those who think that you only do damage when you need to recharge your healing, and those who think that Moira is a DPS. I believe both are valid ways to succeed at playing Moira. The important distinction is that there is a time and place for both playstyles. You shouldn't abandon your team to go chase down the flanking Hanzo when they are about to go through a choke point and take a lot of damage. Moira is well equipped to duel enemies with low health pools. Be careful of enemies with self-healing abilities or armor, as this will most likely negate much of your damage. Moira is great at punishing out-of-position players. I generally use a fade to pounce onto the enemy and disorient them, throw a damage orb at their direction of retreat, and start using Biotic Grasp on them. Use crouching and strafing to evade their attacks. The main reason to use a damage ability is to gain resource. The second reason is to secure a kill. If you do not secure a kill and your resources are full, you are feeding the enemy healer's ult charge. Your ultimate charges so much faster through healing than doing damage. Prioritize low health targets rather than go after a full health one. We're using two forms of damage to damage one or more enemies. Damage Orb and Biotic Grasp. This combo does 100 DPS. That is definitely significant. Any squishy in your way will go down quite easily. Damage Orb and Coalescence. 120 DPS can be applied to multiple targets. Use this to force a retreat or prevent enemies from grouping up. I will note a particularly good time to use this combo. Having just taken first point on a hybrid map such as King's Row, push forward to where the enemy is regrouping and use this combo. I have almost never failed in wiping all of the stragglers with this strategy. It forces a delay for the enemies to be able to recontest. Use this combo to deny teamfights. If you get a pick or two with this combo, the fight is pretty much over. It's comparable to Mercy's. She's really good at it. Know when to heal allies or to heal yourself. If you and an ally are in danger, consider sacrificing the ally to save yourself. You do this by using your Biotic Grasp on enemies to heal yourself for 30 heals per second. With good aim, this can be quite oppressive to a few enemies, but don't expect to survive long in front of the whole enemy team. Your survival is generally more important than that of your teammates, but sometimes your teammate might almost have the game-winning ultimate, in which case it will be worth healing them up and risk dying yourself. Use it to finish off opponents. I will go into a little more detail in the animation cancel section. When you see your enemy getting low, continue using Biotic Grasp while approaching them. You should time it so that once they are within melee range, they are low enough to be knocked down from a single punch. Note that melee does 30 damage per second, while Biotic Grasp does 50 damage per second. If you mistime your melee so that it doesn't land the kill, you would have been better off not using it. Melee in combination with Damage Orb and Biotic Grasp can deal with pesky flankers quite fast. The trick is to surprise them. Most people facing Moira don't expect to be met with 130 damage. Whole kit. I see many lower ranked Moiras don't use crouch at all. When dueling players that can headshot, it makes their lives a lot more difficult when you crouch. Strafing must be done correctly in order for it to be effective. Simply spamming left-right in a predictable pattern does not tend to work against higher ranked players. Use a combination of strafing and crouching to increase your evasiveness. On to shields. With the semi-recent update, Moira can no longer heal using Biotic Grasp through barriers. I have not found this change incredibly limiting, but it is a little bit annoying. Tell your team to break Winston bubbles that cut your line of sight. Rhine Shield has never been an issue for me. You generally never have a Rhine Shield between you and an ally. Symmetra Ultimate might seem quite oppressive, but it can be dealt with pretty easily. I try to save up Coalescence for Photon Barrier. I can then fire a damage orb and use Coalescence to put a lot of pressure on the enemy's healers. Orisa Barrier is generally not in your way either. But it is typically always better to use Healing Orb. There are certain situations where Damage Orb is better, but I will go through those, and there are not many. Healing Orb heals at 75 heals per second for 300 health points, while Damage Orb does 50 damage per second for 200 damage. You get more ult charge for successfully using a Healing Orb, and don't feed enemies ult charge. Make sure to use map geometry to keep orbs in use for as long as possible. The orb has a 10-second cooldown. Make the most of it. If there are no nearby walls, you will get more value from an orb if thrown at a slight downward angle. Remember triangles, side A plus side B is greater than side C. The orb will stay in the effective area for a longer time. Make sure that your orbs get slowed in the right spot. Since the orbs slow down when they are used, this can either help or hinder your plans. I can't really get into many specifics as there are many possibilities, but I'll mention one. You see a teammate a little way off in need of healing, however, you are at 190 HP. Make sure you intend for that orb to arrive later than it should, given it will slow down immediately to restore your 10 lost health. When you throw an orb to a target, don't throw it at them. Throw it at their intended path so they collide with it when it reaches them. This allows for the maximum effectiveness of the orb. Your orb is on a 10-second cooldown. There is no point in using them if you can't guarantee some significant use from them. I may harp on damage orbs a lot during this guide, but it doesn't matter that much which orb you decide to use every time. If you don't anticipate your team taking a lot of damage soon, it's fine to toss out a damage orb to get some ult charge. The Healing Orb is a tool that gets you a lot of ult charge really fast. Use it as your team pushes into a choke point, but only after your teammates start to take damage, as you don't want it to rush away and be lost forever. Bounce it around objectives near your team. There are often a few parallel walls near objectives to do this. Throw Healing Orb at teammates too far to heal normally. If your team has another healer like Zen or Anna who can better heal that teammate, tell them to do so. There's no point in using a Healing Orb to restore less than 100 HP if you don't have to. Low on resources? Stop using damage orbs. Healing orbs are a great resource when you don't have much healing left. Once again, make sure they get a lot of use. There are few times when using damage orb is appropriate. If you throw a damage orb during a fight, have a really good reason. For example, there is a low HP Zenyatta that you can finish off quickly with an orb. Don't fire a damage orb unless you're pretty sure that you can secure a kill with it. Otherwise, you are feeding the enemy healer's ult charge. If this is a trade-off you're willing to take, go for it. Just know that you will be getting more ult charge from healing orbs. Don't worry about this too much, but keep it in mind. If you already have your ult and you throw a damage orb into a big group of enemies, you have accomplished nothing but give the enemy healers ult charge. If there isn't a lot of pressure on your team and you find that your team doesn't require much healing, damage orb is acceptable. This is assuming your team is either steamrolling or more skilled. You can afford to have some fun with damage orb. I call early damage orbs. When defending, there is always a spot to throw a damage orb at the enemy spawn to get early ult charge. Sometimes you can get off up to 2 orbs before an enemy engagement, giving you roughly 23% ult charge. If possible, aim for the top of the spawn door at a slightly downward angle and time the orb so that when the spawn door opens, the orb just hits the top of the door. This will make the orb follow the enemy team out of the door rather than have the chance of going into their spawn and not giving you all of the potential ult charge. Get down timings for different maps. Certain maps are really big, like Blizzard World, and you might have to fire an orb up to 5 seconds before a match start. This next part's a little confusing. Try to stand as far away from the spawn door as possible when firing these orbs, as you will have to fire your orbs sooner and will be able to use the next orb sooner compared to firing an orb from closer to the spawn door. On to Fade. Fade is used to get to safety and to reposition. Do not use Fade in a combat situation unless you must. Moira is pretty vulnerable having just used Fade against a coordinated enemy team. If you are caught by a stun ability, hold down Shift instead of pressing it as you get out of stun. By holding down Shift, you will use the ability as soon as possible. I often use Fade to avoid burst damage. You don't necessarily need to reposition when using it for this purpose. Use it to bait out ultimates or abilities. Use Fade to avoid getting caught in Graviton Surge or Earth Shatter. Learn to predict these ultimates. Knowing the enemy Ryan has Earth Shatter makes it so much easier to avoid the attack. Use Fade to reposition before ulting. Set up your ult so it has the best potential to be effective. You'll have the cooldown back after you use Coalescence anyway. Fade jumps, fade glides, long jumps, and the useless double jump. Jump right at the end of your fade to gain extra distance through conservation of momentum. Note that it is sometimes impossible to do this on an uneven surface. Make sure you have flat ground ahead of you before you attempt this. I am not very fond of what the community calls fade jumps, and think most of them require a lot of luck and are almost impossible to execute consistently. However, there are a few that I use. There are two more variants of fade jumps that I use from time to time. A fade glide, as I like to call it, is where you use fade to scale steep inclines. There aren't many places to do this, but when you need to get to a certain location, they are way more consistent than fade jumps. Long jumps are done by jumping right after using fade. These are used to cross large gaps such as parallel high grounds. Again, this is much more consistent than using specific map geometry as in the normal fade jump. One use of this is to get onto the bridge outside first point spawn on Gibraltar from the balcony. The double jump is a difficult to execute jump that can only be done on flat ground. It travels a little bit longer than the normal fade into jump and offers you more practice with timing long jumps. Start by performing a long jump. The moment you land, execute another jump. Your fade will have just ended and you will maintain your momentum from the second jump. Unless you are feeling really confident, stay away from purely using your ult for offensive purposes. Make sure to combo it with a damage orb. Wait for the cooldown if you do not have a damage orb available. This is very important. Do not switch targets. Staying on a target will secure you more kills. Once you have finished with your first target, move to another. Make sure you are prioritizing the right target. Even if you are looking at a densely grouped team of 6, focus on one player. A good time to use an offensive ult would be right as the enemy is trying to regroup after their last fight. You should be able to take a few enemies quite easily who are separated from their team, but beware of their ults and don't get too greedy. Your beam cuts through to the enemy backline. Focus on those healers. Simply ignore the front line and stick to the healers. You might even force out a defensive ult. Necessarily need to combo it with Healing Orb. Coalescence is typically enough healing to do what you need at 140 healing per second. Focus on teammates taking direct damage first or extremely low allies, then move to the rest of your team. Encourage your team to stand within line of sight. Using Coalescence against the Graviton Surge is usually only a safe bet with the Healing Orb, but depending on the enemy team's ability to follow up on the Graviton Surge, may be enough healing with usage. This is typically how you will use your ult. Use your knowledge of target prioritization to decide whether to heal or damage. Remember that if you commit to damaging an enemy, try to stick to that choice. If you remove your beam to heal an ally, that enemy will have been healed up, most likely when you return to them. This wasted your time and fed the enemy healer's ult charge. Try to get into a position where you can hit as many targets as possible. This might mean behind or to the side of the enemy. Use Fade to get to that location and ult immediately. Commit to your decisions. It's widely believed that Moira's ult is underwhelming. I believe this is because they don't really know how or when to use it effectively. My Coalescence kills stat has been in the top 1% for many of my accounts. I tend to focus my ult for about 30% healing and 70% damage. This does not mean I'm only doing damage 70% of the time. I almost always have an enemy and ally lined up together. It just means that I focus on either damage or healing during that time. I'd like to talk about the importance of good aim. I really hate to hear it when someone says that Moira doesn't require aim. Aim is such a crucial part of being able to succeed with all of her abilities. For reference, my secondary fire stat sits at around 70 to 75%. I know that there is this idea that you can hold down right click all the time as it doesn't cost resources and, of course, will throw off your accuracy statistic. Honestly, you should get into the practice of not using abilities you don't have to use, even if they don't cost resources. It's just bad form. Without good aim, you do significantly less damage and won't secure as many kills as Moira players with better aim. You also pressure squishy targets much less. Pressure might lead to them using escape abilities that they didn't want to give up so soon. Using your healing spray efficiently requires good aim. Biotic Grasp healing spray is a projectile beam. It requires you to lead your targets if they're moving. Some Moira players I see do not even try to heal while tracking an ally, and instead just spam heals in the direction of the ally. Using healing accurately saves resource and can often prevent teammates' deaths. Coalescence is a wide ult, but requires decent tracking to use effectively. Orbs need to be fairly precise in most situations, and in fast-paced games there isn't time to carefully aim that one orb. Being able to flick an orb to a desired location can be a godsend. Luckily, I have over 400 hours on Widow, so that came pretty easily for me. It takes time to get down good aim. Moira doesn't require the precision of other heroes, but it's still significant. While we're on the topic of aim, I'd like to discuss the 180-degree flick. I'd recommend this for all heroes. It really helps in a lot of different situations. For Moira, it allows you to check your surroundings and get back to what you need to be doing very quickly. I find it especially useful when dealing with Genji. When Genji is at low health, he will either try to flee or kill you. If he decides to kill you, he'll most likely dash through and try and execute a shuriken melee combo on your back. This means he is close enough for you to melee. I have killed countless Genjis just by using a 180-degree flick melee after they dashed through me. Talk about who you need to focus on. When healing, help your supports first. You have amazing peel potential as Moira. They will be grateful and you will win more games. Then move on to tanks, and then DPS. As Moira, your greatest strength is healing tanks, so leave healing DPS more to the other support. When doing damage, target enemy healers first, then DPS. If you really have nothing better to do, go after a tank. Stay close to your tanks, but not too close. About half the distance your healing can reach is a safe bet. Be mindful of Zarya trying to bubble Rein. It is pretty easy for you to step in front of Zarya and take the bubble by accident at this range. Flanking is almost never what you should be doing and is generally fairly risky if the enemy decides to turn on you. Try to heal around corners so that you don't have direct line of sight to the enemy. There's no reason to be in line of sight of the enemy unless you are recharging resource, securing a kill, using Coalescence, or firing an orb. When using Coalescence, anything goes as long as you're not being focused. Play it safe, but know that you have quite the sustain. Maps that favor high grounds are more difficult for Moira as she doesn't have reliable vertical mobility. Try to initiate fights from high ground, and if you must drop down, do so with your teammates. There is a variant of a fade jump where you can glide up sloped walls to get to certain platforms. Use this tactic when applicable. Your job is to contest flankers and protect your second support. Keep near your support. Moira is one of the best peelers. Moira's playstyle is fairly consistent throughout different compositions. This leads others to think that she's less viable in anything that's not Deathball, but I respectfully disagree. If your team is running a more conventional composition such as Dive or Rein Zarya 222, you will be spending more resource healing single targets, who are either behind or to the side of you. This is the main reason people tend to think that Moira is situational. She will run out of resource fast if you don't manage your resource carefully. Use more healing orbs and you should be fine. When running Goats 3-3 or another Deathball variant, do not get picked first. The fight will be lost and your team won't even be able to gain much ult charge waiting for you to return. Stay behind your shields and keep up with your tanks. There is no reason to stay behind your team because they are moving very fast to your destination, where they need a lot of healing. Stay inside of your team, behind shield, until you get to the objective. Once your team engages a fight, stay back and let your tanks create space. Playing against Coordinated Dive is tough but manageable. Save Fade and Healing Orb for dives. Use Healing Orb in the opposite direction of D.Va right after she lets down Defense Matrix if needed. Healing Orb will often prevent you from having to fade immediately, so that once the enemy does decide to focus you, you will have fade to escape. By the time Healing Orb has been used up, your team will have done a fair amount of damage, and most likely forced to retreat unless the dive is super coordinated. You could also use Damage Orb here, but just make sure you have enough healing to outlive the dive, as your only healing is the Biotic Grasp to heal yourself. A lot of confusion when it comes to healer pairing with Moira. In general, I think Moira can pair fairly well with every healer. Some picks are better than others given specific compositions or maps, but it's nothing to stress about. Pairing with Zenyatta, you tend to hear that Zen Moira sucks, but in reality, it's fine as long as your team sticks together for the most part. I think this notion that it's bad comes from scrims where it is generally weaker than most other proper compositions. One huge advantage to Zen Moira that is often overlooked is that Transcendence and Moira's Biotic Grasp outheals Graviton Dragon every time. Throw in a heal orb and it's guaranteed. Also, using Biotic Grasp on discorded 200 HP targets forces them to either retreat or die in little time. Ana Moira is not bad, but not great. You can out-heal Dragon combo with Nade Orb Coalescence. Nade enables insane amounts of healing. Moira can peel for Ana like no other healer, which is great because Ana has no mobility. Mercy Moira. If you don't have to worry about a Graviton combo or any other really high damage ultimate, this pairing is decent. It enables the Moira player to easily get back heals and deal a fair bit of damage. Also, damage boosted Moira often surprises enemies and you can easily take down 200 HP targets in many circumstances. This composition is a little weak because it lacks consistent damage from its supports, much like Mercy Ana. Lucio Moira is known to be reliable. Lucio does a fair amount of healing and provides a good defensive ult. Speed is also a huge advantage when playing things like Deathball. Things to be aware of is that both healers will spend some time not healing. For example, speed boost or getting more resources. Try to coordinate with your team so there's always an active healer next to your team. Pairing with Brigitte, you will generally want to have another healer. Brig Moira is not great unless the other team is not very coordinated or your team is very coordinated. The heals are just too inconsistent. You might want to add Zen or Lucio. Cancels aren't something you normally think about when you first hear Moira, but they are pretty helpful in some instances. Melee into Fade. If you need to escape an enemy at close range, consider giving them a hit right before leaving. You can melee into Fade to cancel the melee animation but still land the damage. Orb into Fade. If you need to reposition but are in an enemy-rich area, you can fire an orb and Fade to cancel the orb animation. If you time it right, this takes just as much time as feigning normally, but you send the enemies a little gift. You can also send a healing orb in the direction you are planning to fade to. Orb into Coalescence. I spoke of this combo but never really explained this part of it. You can send an orb out right before using Coalescence to cancel the orb animation. Coalescence into Melee. This is probably the funniest looking animation I have run into, and it's also fairly useless because of how unlikely a situation will come up in which playing with suboptimal pairings. Pharah. Many people dislike pairing Moira with Pharah because of the limited amount of healing that Pharah will receive. I have found some ways around this. Play near Pharah and tell her to do the same to you. She can dip down for heals when she needs them. One thing to note is that your accuracy with healing needs to be really good so you don't take too long to heal her up. Remember that you are replacing a Mercy who can't miss heals. Your second support should be able to help Pharah. If your team is running Moira or Lucio, I don't know why your team has a Pharah in the first place. I hear this one often, that Genji is not optimal to be played with Moira. Genji, similar to Pharah, plays out of your reach most of the time. He needs to rely on your second support for heals, but make sure to keep an eye on him and focus heals on him the moment he gets close enough. If he's going for a flank, try not to alert the enemy by tossing a healing orb across the map. Genji should be able to seek out health packs by himself. Toss down a healing orb at Genji's Dragon Blade. He will get a lot of focus fire during his ult. Endgame stats. Having high illuminations means you are focusing the right targets. It does not mean that you are carrying or need some great commendation. If you are playing well, expect to have gold illuminations most of the time. Objective kills doesn't necessarily have much to do with how well you are playing, but more often than not, you will have a medal for this stat. Moira should be near the objective during most times in a team fight. Expect to spend some time on the objective. Like I said in objective kills, you should have a medal for objective time. Damage will vary match to match. There's no way to say how well you did with this stat alone. You should never have more damage than healing at the end of a match. It is possible to pull insane damage numbers on this hero, but unless you're getting kills, that damage is going right into the enemy healer's ults. I often hear less than 10k healing per 10 minutes sucks. Not necessarily. Some games go very well and you literally can't get more healing done. As long as you're keeping your team healthy, don't worry about it. Keep in mind that if you're dying a lot, your healing will be less than it should be. On the other end, Moira can surpass any healer in the game with her heals per second. I sometimes end up with averages higher than 20k heals per 10 minutes. You should only really die as Moira when the enemy gets a team wipe. Play smart and don't always follow your teammates into dangerous situations. Analyze why you died and learn from whatever went wrong. I won't give numbers here as I believe this number varies not always by skill but by the playstyle of each rank. I found myself dying a lot more on my Diamond Smurf than in 4200 games. I could be wrong though. In general, you should not be concerned about different matches yielding different statistics. Your stats will depend a lot on your team composition. Deaths, however, should stay about the same. In this next section, I will discuss hero matchups and tricks I've learned to deal with various heroes of Overwatch. Bastion. Similar to other armored enemies, it's fairly useless to go after Bastion until his armor is down. Once it is though, you should be able to do some decent damage. Coalescence and Damage Orb will likely force a Bastion to reposition at the least. Doomfist is usually very easy to hear coming. I can often bait a Doomfist into attacking me and fade out right before he lands on me. While Moira is not great at getting to high ground, stepping down off a ledge right before Doom lands on you will often negate his ability. Use corners to avoid his attacks if you are down your fade. Dealing with Genji, Moira is a great pick, as his deflect doesn't protect him against Biotic Grasp. Be sure to wait until his deflect is on cooldown to fire an orb in his direction. If you must fire an orb, do so to the side, bottom, or top of him. Make sure you have fade available for Dragon Blade. Try to bait Genji to chase you with his dash and then fade away. From here, you can throw a damage orb and attempt to finish him off. Hanzo is fairly easy to take down with Damage Orb and Biotic Grasp. Just make sure to strafe and crouch. Don't challenge a Hanzo when he uses Storm Arrow, you will lose most times. With good enough aim, you can survive 2 body shots from Hanzo from your self-healing Biotic Grasp. Junk is easy enough to take down if he gets too close. Just throw an orb his way and use Biotic Grasp. If he's low and tries to use his mind to escape, you can generally finish the kill with a long range of Biotic Grasp. Use Fade to bait Riptire. Some Junkrat players will see this coming and not fall for it. If you see Riptire approaching, use your right click on it. Same goes for Coalescence. For McCree, once his flashbang is down, he's pretty easy to take care of with Orb and Grasp. Just be careful of really good McCrees, as they will likely out-damage you. Bait out flashbang with Fade. Beware of McCree's position before ulting, as he can easily stun you out of Coalescence or use High Noon to kill you immediately. For Mei, use Fade to escape Blizzard. Fading also removes any progress Mei has made on freezing you. toss a damage orb at Mei when she comes out of cryo freeze and encourage your team to focus her. When ulting, keep your distance from her as it's not too difficult for her to freeze you and cancel your ult. As for Pharah, if she keeps her distance, there's not much you can do. If a Pharah is within range to use Grasp on, consider if it's worth throwing an orb at her trajectory. With Orb Grasp, you can take down a Pharah fairly fast. She is a good target during Coalescence, but make sure she doesn't have a Pocket Mercy or you'll just be wasting your time. If she has Barrage, save Fade. When you fade away from Barrage, fade around the corner, it is likely that you will have already taken a lot of damage from her Barrage. Any good Pharah players will predict your fade destination. Reaper can be a big problem for Moira. Keep your distance. You have to be very lucky in order to take a Reaper down 1v1. Fade out of Death Blossom. Be sure to jump at the end to get farther away, as Death Blossom can move towards your fade direction. Soldier 76. You can't kill him very easily with Orb Grasp with his healing pod on him. However, if he's less than half health before he drops healing, you should be in a good position to finish him off. Do not contest an ulting soldier with Coalescence unless you are close to cover. Sombra can be quite annoying if they focus hack on you. Be sure that EMP or hack is not available when you use Coalescence, or you may be rudely interrupted. Unless the Sombra is a god, she will likely not be able to take you down if you are using Biotic Grasp on her. If you anticipate Sombra using EMP, throw out a healing orb that will bounce between two parallel walls. It won't get destroyed and your team will have extra healing. You can also dodge EMP with a well-timed fade. New Symmetra's beam range is quite short compared to the range of Biotic Grasp. Keep your distance and you should be able to take her down. Do be careful to avoid her projectiles, which shouldn't be too difficult. Save Coalescence for her photon barrier so that when the enemy decides to push on with it, you can still heal and damage through the barrier. Make sure to save an orb as well. Against Torbjorn, do not attempt to take down Torb's turret unless it's low. If it targets you, your Biotic Grasp will not heal you from the attacking turret. Also, your orb will not attack the turret. Coalescence will work to clear out a turret, but there are probably better uses for your ult. Torbjorn himself has armor, so he's a little tricky to deal with. If he has any armor packs at his disposal, it might be better to get some help, but don't be afraid to Orb Grasp him if he is without his turret. Tracers will not be able to deal with you if you are vigilant. You can apply pressure to Tracers by constantly right-clicking them whenever they try to flank. This should also prevent you from being one-clipped. One tactic I use against Tracers a lot is to let them unload about half a clip into me while using Grasp on them, then fade. The fade can reappear wherever, but it is important that you continue to use Grasp on the Tracer. She will either have continued to unload her weapons, at which point she now needs to reload or recall, or she still has half a clip left that she will most likely not be able to kill you with due to your repositioning. Throw an orb in the mix and she doesn't really stand a chance. You can avoid pulse spawn with fade. Make sure you are not dropping it on an ally. Widowmaker. You can fire an orb at Widow to relieve some pressure from your team and force her to reposition. Coming from someone who plays a lot of Widow, even if the orb just takes 50 HP from the Widow, she will feel a lot more pressure from your team and play more conservatively. If Widow doesn't have her grappling hook, and you can fade to her position and have orb, it's usually a free kill. Just be wary of her teammates' positions. It's also very easy to kill Venom Mines as Moira. Diva. It's not much use going after Diva when she still has armor, as armor really takes a toll on Moira's damage output. Once Diva's armor is down, you can contest her. Be careful about throwing orbs when Diva is nearby. Never throw healing orbs directly towards her, and if you must throw a damage orb towards the enemy, wait until Diva just used Defense Matrix or has her back turned. On demaking, toss a damage orb at Diva to kill her faster. You can kill her in about a second with Orb Biotic Grasp melee. Against Orisa, you are a great counter to her supercharger. If the enemy Orisa uses bongos to engage, you can sort of counter-engage by using Coalescence to both destroy her ultimate and allow your team to push forward with extra healing. Coalescence is one of the only abilities capable of damaging through barriers at range. Don't bother attacking her when she uses Fortify unless she is really low health. Unless you want to get caught by Halt, you need to activate Fade before she activates her Halt. There is another trick you can sort of abuse with Halt, where if you fade right as Halt pulls you in a direction, you can maintain the momentum from the Halt and launch in whatever direction you are going. Against Reinhardt, it is your job to predict Earth's shatter. There is no reason for you to get shattered unless you get stunned beforehand. Use sound cues. You can now heal a Rein swinging into your teammates. You can listen for Rein charging and fade out of his charge before he gets to you. Use sound cues to make sure you know he's coming. With Roadhog, use fade to evade his hooks. You can even bait a Roadhog's hook if he's giving your team trouble. If caught by hook, hold down shift instead of tapping it. Sometimes the Roadhog will kill you no matter what, but if you hold down shift, there's a better chance of surviving. I will note here that Karq says in his tips video that you may throw a healing orb in the direction of your fade, but I would not bother, as you will most likely not have enough health to survive a melee which Hog can perform almost instantly. Use fade away and throw the orb right as you reappear. If you wish to be aggressive with your ultimate, I suggest waiting until Hog's hook is down before ulting. Against Winston, keep an eye on where he is diving. You can usually out-heal him for long enough if he decides to dive you alone, but might want to use a healing orb if there's more than one diving you. Tell your team to get rid of his barrier, and if you have nothing better to do, help with that yourself. You might have to step into his bubble to heal an ally. Try to have fade up so you can escape if things don't go well. I haven't faced off against Wrecking Ball that much, but looking at his abilities, it appears you can fade to avoid being tossed around by his grapple hook ability. You should also be able to survive 1v1 as long as you are preventing him from getting too many headshots. By the time you get low health, you'll probably have fade ready. Fade out of his mines, don't let them clip you as they might throw you back into more mines. Against Zarya, save fade for Graviton Surge. If you know it's coming, try not to get caught, but know that you can still escape even if you do get caught. Throw Healing Orb and use Biotic Grasp to allies stuck in Graviton Surge. Coalescence is really only needed for big ult combos, and sometimes you should save Coalescence and just accept that you cannot out-heal the Graviton Surge. Don't be afraid to take a Zarya 1v1 unless she is very charged. Some advanced strategy against Zarya is to attempt to tank the Graviton Surge only to fade out of it. I've pulled this off only a couple times. Ana is not a very big threat as long as her sleep is down. Your fade can not only get rid of the anti-nade effect, but can also stop the ticking damage of Ana's rifle. Against Brigitte, Damage Orb is a great way to eat away at the enemy's armor. When Brig ult ends, toss a Damage Orb at the enemy. Brigitte can often get away by holding up shield when at low health. Damage Orb will either force the low health Brigitte to turn around and keep the orb on the other side of her shield, or the orb will catch up to her and kill her. Coalescence is a great counter to Brigitte as it not only damages her, but also her shield. Be careful not to get too close to her as she will look to stun you out of your ultimate. Lucio does not pose much of a threat. If he gets too close, just throw Damage Orb at him and you can dispatch him fairly easily. Sometimes a Lucio will attempt to stall point by wall riding around on the side walls. You can easily take care of this with long range of Biotic Grasp. Mercy is a high priority target, but it's easy to tunnel vision her and lose track of your own team's health. Go after her only when you are sure your team is supported. If you see her use Guardian Angel, fire an orb at her destination and use a Biotic Grasp. When using Coalescence offensively, aim for Mercy first. Even in Valkyrie, she is not too difficult to take down. If you see an enemy die in a resable spot, keep an eye out for Mercy trying to res. Save an orb, and when you see her go for the res, fire a Damage Orb at her and use Biotic Grasp. While she may get the res off, you will almost always kill her. Moira 1v1s are kind of stupid. Don't go after her unless she's down both cooldowns and you are up both cooldowns. Simply fade after her and use Damage Orb Grasp to get the kill. Against Zenyatta, Discord Orb can be rough for Moira. If you get caught in the open with Discord, you can fade to become undiscorded. Since Zen has no mobility, he might seem like a good target to dive by yourself, but a good Zen will take you down fast. Try to force Transcendence with your Coalescence if your team is relying on a Dragon Blade or Graviton Surge to win the fight. You might even be able to force Transcendence by targeting the enemy main healer. My twin brother helped me make some of the clips in this video. He is also a top 500 support main, having peaked at rank 68. Thanks for watching. I hope you took some points from this video despite how fast-paced it was. If you disagree with some of my tips, you may just play Moira differently. There are many ways to succeed with Moira, so keep doing you. The best way to improve is to review your gameplay and figure out what you are lacking. Use my tips and make your gameplay even better. Bye for now.